Now, my
Yeah,
background
yeah.
is Xiamen, which is Fujian province. This picture doesn't show that much, but when I was there this summer, I noticed actually Xiamen because a lot of the Chinese living overseas in Southeast Asia, they are from Fujian province. So I see a lot of the
Oh,
architectural
interesting.
similarities there, so, but this picture doesn't show. But when I was walking there, because I've been to Malaysia, Singapore, those places, there's a
Yeah,
lot of the southern Chinese, Fujian Chinese there. And then
mm,
even the architecture,
yeah.
you can see some similarities. So how is your trip?
Interesting. It was very interesting. I went to a conference which I found completely uninteresting. But it was very interesting to see Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, and I've been there before. Interesting, and I met a lot of people in Malaysia who follow my programs, and that was very attractive and very lovely. And many of them, by the way, a disproportionate number of them, I noticed, were Chinese.
I visited Malaysia many times when I was working for Ericsson also. So I noticed that they're pretty big influence in the Chinese influence there, and they are very much have their own community. Within the community, they speak Chinese. They very much just like China. That's my impression. Yeah.
Absolutely, that was my
Yeah.
impression too,
Yeah.
and very British,
Yeah.
very, very, very
Yeah.
British,
Yeah.
right down to the fact that you have all the uh, tailors from Hong Kong who've also established themselves in KL, make suits for you, which are absolutely have Savile Row quality, from what I could see. There was a tailor who contacted me, and I went to
Oh,
his
okay.
shop, and absolute Savile Row quantity at about a 20th of the price. So, I mean, seriously, if you want to get it would comfortably cost
Okay.
the it cover the cost of the flight and the hotel, and you'd end up with a much better wardrobe than you could afford in London. That's the truth of it. I might
Maybe,
even do it one day.
yeah, maybe Keir Starmer should
Sorry.
buy some clothes from there.
Oh well, absolutely, yeah. Very, very elegant, old-fashioned English style tailoring, I have to say, with
Yeah.
except that you could get it done in silk, which is, of course, something that only Chinese really know how to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Uh, we haven't talked last week, so there's packet of things
No.
I really wanted to talk to you. Let's start, even though there's a lot of things going on in the Middle East. I want to start with China because there's quite a few things in China. One is this thing
Mm,
that got a lot of Chinese attention is this link that I sent to you, the U.S.
mm,
2024 navigation plan. It's called a navigation
mm,
plan. I guess it's basically the naval plan, right? U.S. naval, what they're
mm,
planned to do the next few years. The reason that this thing got
mm,
attention is this person, the chief of naval operation. I think her name is Lisa Franchetti. She's the one was having some meeting, and then during that meeting, she was holding this plan and talking about the China
mm,
threat and etc. And that video clip got lots of attention. And so I looked it up, and
oh
so I
yeah.
find this plan. Now, in there, it's clearly stated that this Navy navigation plan drives towards two strategic ends: readiness for the possibility of a war with China, with People's Republic of China by
Mm,
2027, and then enhancing the Navy long-term advantage. So it's clearly stated that they're getting ready to have a war by 2027 with
mm.
China. What is your take on this?
Well, I was absolutely horrified. I'm glad you sent me the document because I'm going to, if you don't mind, share it with a number of people I
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah,
because this is absolute war fighting, a war fighting plan.
mhm,
There is no other way around this. I mean, we have all of these people who talk about, China being this great threat to the United States. We talked about, well, I'm not saying he goes that far, but we talked about Professor Mearsheimer and his views last time we spoke. Well, this tells you who is looking for a fight here. It is the US. I know of no plan by China, an analogous plan by China to do anything like this. And of course, it isn't just an aspiration. I mean, what was absolutely shocking to me was the detail it
yeah,
went into, all the new concepts and ideas. This is absolutely a plan for war. Reminded me of
uh,
British naval policy before the First World War. that they were clearly planning for a war against Germany. And this is exactly, it looked exactly like that.
Talking about this 2027 thing. So apparently I read somewhere else that they were saying that China is preparing for a war at 2027. But I cannot find anywhere in the Chinese media about this. In fact, there was a report that Xi Jinping himself heard about this, and he even commented saying, I haven't set any that date in 2027, nor have I heard anybody to tell me anything about 2027. So this is clearly the US setting the goal, even though I saw some other reports saying China is preparing to take back Taiwan, this and that by 2027, having a war with the US. So now once you have something like this out, then of course China has to prepare, right? To prepare for something that US is preparing for. And then it's cycled back saying, you see, China is preparing for 2027. You see what they're doing now. It's like,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just think what the United States would do if China published a statement, a policy document.
like that, yeah.
If China published a document like this, imagine what the US would say and
Yeah.
what the US would do. Of course, China has no option but to respond. And of course, we know as night follows day that whenever that happens, it's taken as proof of Chinese aggressiveness.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so this is one thing that got lots of attention. And the other thing, in the meantime, also there's another guy who is in the Air Force, Frank Kendall. He's the Secretary of the Air Force. He was also talking about the China threat. They almost like echo each other. What he was saying in one of the meetings, he's saying, I'm not saying the war in the Pacific is imminent or inevitable, but it's not. But I'm saying that the likelihood is increasing and will continue to do so. So you see, they almost echo each other. So they're trying to build a narrative together now, isn't it? The US military.
Well, if you talk about this, if you talk about a war being probable and likely, then that makes it far more likely to happen.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
would China seek war with the United States?
yeah.
This is the question nobody ever asks. Nobody in Washington and in the United States, well, I mean, of course, a few people do, but China has no interest in war. It is a country that has prospered economically. It is the world's major trading country. It needs to conduct trade in order to develop its economy. And if you look at the statements that the Chinese leadership make, they are absolutely clear and they clearly reflect the interests of Chinese society, which is the prosperity and future of the Chinese people. I cannot imagine that they have any other objective, because if anybody knows what Chinese history has been like over the last 200 years, you can completely understand why, over and above the fact that China has never been a militaristic and belligerent society, as we have discussed before, why, after all that has happened over the last 2 years, the Chinese people want peace so that they can develop their country and achieve further prosperity and economic progress. That is all that China intends. I cannot myself see any evidence that it has any other plans for anything else.
But they are. It seems like the U.S. military is definitely prepared for the Navy and Air Force. They all have these kind of rhetoric. And then the follow-up question is that Wang Yi met Blinken during this UN assembling session, right? They had a sideline meeting. And the readout is this. I find it pretty extraordinary. This is what Wang Yi said, that the United States should not always approach China with two faces. On the one hand, encircling and suppressing China brazenly, and on the other hand, having dialogue and cooperation with China as if nothing is wrong. Since the United States has expressed multiple times that it has no intention to have conflict with China, then fundamentally it needs to establish a rational perception of China and find the right way to get along with it. The United States needs to carry out a dialogue with respect, advance cooperation in a spirit of reciprocity, and address differences with great prudence, rather than act willfully as it sees fit with a position of strength, or use previous mistakes as excuses to make more mistakes. I find that statement pretty strong, pretty blunt. Seems to me like China had it. What do you
Yes, it
think?
is. It is one. I think. I mean, I hadn't actually read that readout, and thank you for letting me know because obviously there's been so many other things to follow. I think that's the strongest readout from any Chinese official to an American official that I have ever seen. I mean, Chinese readouts have been getting stronger and stronger for the last 4 years. But this is the strongest one so far. And two-faced, the expression of the use of the word two-faced, I think takes it further than any other that we've seen, because clearly this is. I mean, the Chinese have had enough. I mean, um, this concept that the Americans always have that China must help us when we are in trouble, but at the same time, we can do whatever we like to put them in a worse and worse and worse position. I mean, you cannot conduct negotiations, discussions in that kind of way. And I think that we will eventually come to the point when the Chinese will say not just enough, but they will start straightforwardly deciding that the United States is a hostile power. I don't think they want that, but when they read documents like the one you've just shown me about the naval policy, of which, of course, they must be fully familiar, well, that must be the point when they say to themselves, "Well, these people are just lying to us."
And also followed up, yesterday was China's National Day, and 75 years
Yeah.
China's established itself. To be honest, it is quite a remarkable achievement. Let's face it, right? It's when I read quite a few things about when China first when the Communist Party first took over China, the whole China had 50,000 US dollars as foreign reserve, and 50,000. And it's different kinds of money, some are dirty, some are wrapped together, it's just all kinds of places people put in the money, 50,000.
Yeah.
That's all they had.
Yeah.
And for 75 years to achieve what they achieved today, I find that's extraordinary. That's pretty remarkable. But
Absolutely.
anyway, yeah. But anyway, so one thing they did is actually they don't no longer just talking. So China, the other thing, big thing is a few days before the National Day, the October 1st, China tested a intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, there is speculations that Russia also tested one, but failed. I don't think Russia ever confirmed that, but that's so there's speculation saying, okay, China has to test one to let the West know, even though Russian might fail, but China said that they actually has been preparing for this for some time. So I don't think it's directly related. But the interesting thing is the Pentagon's response to that. So here's what Pentagon spokesperson said when she was asked about it. She said, "Oh, we think it's a good thing, a step in the right direction to preventing any misperception, miscalculation." So that I think got lots of attention in Chinese media because people are saying they're saying Huawei is a national security and TikTok is national security. But when you have an intercontinental ballistic missile, they seem to be saying that's a good news. Now, what do
No,
you what's your interpretation of this?
can I just say that you're absolutely right, firstly, before I proceed, about the tremendous achievements that China has had in the last 75 years. And of course, the Chinese people have every good reason to celebrate their National Day. Those 75 years have not always been easy and smooth, but we have got to where we are, and that's been the result of very, very hard work. By the way, Putin congratulated Xi Jinping. They spoke to each other, I believe, on the occasion of the day. But anyway, just to proceed, the Americans want to militarize the relationship with China. I mean, that's what it is. What they want is to move away from a situation where China is an economic partner to a situation where China is straightforwardly a military adversary, because they understand very well that they can't compete with China in terms of selling the goods that people want to the world. Well, actually, perhaps they could. Perhaps if they focused on doing that, perhaps they could. But they don't want to compete with China in that way. They want to compete with China instead in military terms. And they still think that they have an overall military advantage, and they've said ridiculous things like, the fact that we are, far more experienced in war than the Chinese are. That gives us the advantage, and all those absurd things that they often say. And so, absolutely right. They don't want to compete at the level of smartphones, and they don't want to compete at the level of laptops. They can't. They don't want to compete in production of chips or EVs or any of these things. They don't want to engage in mutual trade. They don't want to have Chinese investment in the US. They don't want their own investment to be in China. What they want is instead to compete in, who has the more powerful missiles, where they wrongly believe, by the way, because they do. I mean, they wrongly believe that they still have an advantage.
Yeah, and the US tested one not that long ago, the intercontinental ballistic missile. They failed. They failed. And the Russian also, failed. And the Britain, I think, tested one not that long ago, also failed. So it seems to me like China does, still continue to try, but also pretty much almost like a dead end now with diplomatic to be reasoning with the United States. So China is preparing both ways, right? Okay, if you want to talk, you're sincere. We always welcome discussions and dialogues. At the same time, we have to prepare for the worst, because you guys really want to pick up a fight with China, right? So that seems like where China is right now, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we can just make a point about the various missile tests. There's a fundamental difference between the American and British tests and the Chinese and Russian ones, because the Chinese and Russian ones are new missiles. I mean, the Russian one, which is the Salamat missile, it's a completely new missile. So you'd expect things to go wrong. The Chinese missile is a new missile, and it went right. The British and American missiles are old missiles. They are the same missiles that they've been operating since the 60s and 70s. So every so often they test them. So the fact that their missile tests go wrong is an indication that not all is well with these well-established missiles. But you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. They want to go on in this way with military arms race. The Americans believe they win their arms races. They're quite wrong about this, actually. I mean, this has never actually happened. It's never turned out to their advantage. But that is what they prefer.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what they are familiar with. I think diplomacy requires a lot of nuance, a lot of wisdom and skill. I find that they're more maybe I don't know. They're very simple people in a way that they're very straightforward, believing in forces, believing in military power to overpower you. That's something they're familiar with. Do you think there's some elements to that too?
Yeah. Right. Well, of course, it wasn't always this way. I mean, there was a time when the United States had relatively small armed forces, had a huge economy, and engaged in trade. And in fact, if you go back to the period before the World Wars, especially to the interwar period, when the Western powers, the European powers, had carved out concessions in China and forced on China unequal treaties. What you find at that time, if you look at Chinese memoirs and Chinese books and histories at that time, is that the United States actually had a reasonably good reputation in China, precisely because it did focus on trade and commerce and business and doing that sort of thing. But of course, today, it is completely different. I mean, they've lost all those old skills, just as they've lost their skills in diplomacy. Not that those were ever particularly good. The Americans never did diplomacy at any time in their history particularly well. And they have no real tradition or understanding of it. But they've lost those skills. And increasingly, you're quite right, it's all come down to a question of force. It's very tragic, actually. It's a huge waste of resources, and of course it could lead to an even greater tragedy in the end.
Yeah,